people are going to favor their own group no matter what or how arbitrary that group is. See, there's another phenomena. There's so many psychological and sociological sort of principles or phenomena at work with all of this. And one of them is the basic fundamental social personalities that we all have. It's built into us to be social animals. We are selfish animals too, but we are mostly social. And that sociality is how we have survived all of these years. There is no individual person, I think, anywhere in the world who is living a life all on their own with no help or guidance or direction or assistance or contributions from other human beings. I don't know a single person anywhere who's living that way. Maybe there's a few people out living alone in the forests or the jungles somewhere, right? But I don't know who they are, and they're certainly not in touch with anybody else because then they might be being contributed to by other human beings, right? We can all agree that whether there are such people or not, they would be statistically such a tiny, tiny, tiny number of people that it would be statistically irrelevant or insignificant. Most of us have to get along with other people. And our minds are tuned towards tribalism. It's built into us. So modern human beings can group on almost any arbitrary idea at all. You could take a group of people, bring them into a room. In fact, this has been done. Studies have been done on this, and I'm not going to cite them all here and read from them. I'm just going to tell you that studies have been done that where students, for example, have been taken into a room and by the toss of a coin, divided into the reds and the blues, or the guys who like soup and the guys who don't. You can take any arbitrary division, and as soon as you have split people up, immediately they start tuning in to in-group mentality with the other members of their group. They might not have anything else in common but this one thing that they have been divided up into. And so you might have the reds and the blues, right? And the reds are their brains are automatically tuning in to favor their teammates and actually have some antipathy towards the opposing team or group. And that will actually affect their perception of the other group and their perception of their own group. This is called in-group and out-group. Lots and lots and lots of studies and science are behind all of this. And we know that there can actually be changes, skewed perception, vision, hearing, between, for example, let's say somebody in the red group makes some innocuous comment about something. Well, the people in the red group are gonna, they're not gonna take offense at that innocuous comment. But if the same comment were made by somebody over in the blue group, what? He said that? You're that scumbag, right? I mean, it automatically. This all just immediately starts happening because we're instinctively built to do this sort of thing. And there's lots and lots and lots of science explaining all of that. So people will, they're automatically group-oriented and in-group-oriented and out-group-oriented, right? I think I'm making getting the point across there. But let's take a look now. That all being said, you could then say, well, Chris, you said earlier that there is no anti-Scientology cult because, there's this group of people who are all ex-Scientologists and they all identify as ex-Scientologists or Scientology haters, or they don't like Scientology, they want Scientology to be gone. So doesn't that make them all a group? And aren't they isn't there an in-group mentality that forms then versus the other group, Scientology or the world at large? Well, yes, of course there is. But there's some other factors here that I'd like to bring up in terms of how this group behaves and acts, because this is not just a normal, regular group of people. The ex-Scientology world or any destructive cult. I mean, because the Jehovah's Witnesses have support groups and there's a body of people who are former Jehovah's Witnesses who speak out against it, who are critics of it. Everything I'm saying here applies to them too, or the former Mormons, or former Hare Krishnas, or former Democrats. I mean, it doesn't really matter. But it does matter when it comes to these cults, okay? So actually sort of negate what I just said there about Democrats, because it's really not the same thing. The Democratic Party, despite what some people on the right might think, is not a cult any more than the people on the right are a cult. Not a single unified body of thought. That's just not how it is. So the members of a group of people who have come out of a destructive cult have certain things in common. They almost uniformly have these things in common. Trust issues. There are huge trust issues. There is betrayal. There is broken relationships. There is traumatic loss of values, of beliefs, of individuals no longer in their lives because of shunning or disconnection. So this is almost uniformly true for anybody coming out of these groups. They're going to have problems with trust. They're going to have real problems with it. I sure as hell did. And I don't know a single person I have ever met in the entire Scientology, Jehovah's Witness, and any of these groups who didn't tell me or who I didn't observe having trust issues. And it makes sense why they would. They were promised the sun, moon, and stars, and they were not delivered the sun, moon, and stars. They were sort of pushed down into the swamp and mud and made to feel like a lower life form the entire time they were in their cult situations. So they're not quite ready to start trusting other people or groups right away, as a general rule. Then there is a history of systemic abuse, whether it's physical or psychological or both. And this is also a big, big thing, because you can go join a chess club or the Boy Scouts or the Democratic Party and you come up, at some point along the line, you quit the group because it's neither no longer interesting to you, or it's no longer fun, or maybe it's taking up too much of your time, or a litany of other reasons could exist. When you come out of a destructive cult, it's a little bit of a different situation. This was an immersive situation that you were involved in. Your whole life was taken over by this. Very few people who go into these other groups have their entire lives taken over by them. That's one of the reasons we call them destructive cults, because it's destructive to a person's sense and sensibility, right? So there's abuse there. There's emotional abuse, or I should say psychological abuse, and often there's physical abuse of one kind or another. I was physically abused while I was in Scientology, both with overwork, undersleep, underfed. I was beat on. I had a number of things happen to me. I broke my finger. I wasn't allowed to go to the hospital all night long. That was rough, because that was the single most painful thing that ever happened to me. Doesn't seem like much breaking a finger, but when you split a bone at the tip of your finger, trust me, it's very, very painful. I did not enjoy that. So people coming out of these groups tend to have a history of abuse. Then you have financial and or time loss, or both. So people have invested their money, they've invested their time, they've invested both. I gave 27 years of my life to this group. That's a lot of time. And to think that I'm not going to look back at that and go, wow, I wasted some time. A little unrealistic, right? There could also be, those are the things that are pretty common to everybody, but there could also be forms of PTSD. There could be survivor's guilt. And there could be a ton of hindsight bias. And by that I mean you look back at your situation or your circumstances and you blame yourself, or you blame, well, basically yourself, for not knowing better, for being stupid, for falling for things that you now see are not true, but at the time you bought into it, right? All that deception I was talking about. There's a lot of it in these groups. Every single one of them. Again, that's why we call them destructive cults. A regular run-of-the-mill cult, we're okay with those groups. You want to have an extreme chess club, go right ahead, right? But the minute that you are, physically punishing people, psychologically, emotionally abusing them over their chess games, then you're crossing lines. And of course, the deception is all part of this.